Hello, welcome to the first video of a dev diary for an as yet unnamed tabletop RPG. In this video, which is more or less going to be like a podcast episode, I am going to talk about the first steps I'm taking and that I think one could take to design a tabletop RPG from scratch. I think if you've watched any of my other videos, you realize this is a pretty big departure. Everything I've made up to this point has been a 5th edition homebrew video, but when I started this channel, my hope was always to move into a more generalized game design, narrative design, tabletop design, resource channel, portfolio, whatever. I think I'm going to start this video by just talking about who I am and what qualifications I have or don't have in many cases to be making any kind of instructional video about this topic. Without, doxing myself, I am a game designer. I've been working since I graduated college in 2013. I've worked mostly in serious and health games. I've worked a little on mobile games and on tabletop games, like board games kind of stuff. I got a minor in game design in college, but I don't have like an NYU Game Center degree, although I always thought about going for that. But I do have a long history of working on and completing game projects, both for myself and for clients and jobs. That being said, none of those jobs were in specifically tabletop RPGs. I have not worked for Pathfinder or for Wizards of the Coast. But I do feel that a lot of the skills I've gained in my career are transferable to this. And I think I can offer some insights into how you might propose something in a professional setting and the kinds of steps that I've taken throughout my career to make interesting, engaging, and fun experiences. Just as an aside, I am not proposing that this is the way to design a game or a tabletop RPG. I'm saying this is the way that I'm coming at it, and that these could be useful questions to answer if you are thinking about doing this. I know that I'll be actively watching the Designing the Game series from MCDM, and I'm sure they're going to do this in a totally different way. And so I want to structure this video as a series of questions. Questions that you might ask yourself as you begin to make a game, in this case, a tabletop RPG. We're going to talk about how to answer those questions, what kind of decisions go into that, and then I am going to give my answers for the game that I hope to design over the course of this video series. And so we're going to start with the big one, which is, why am I doing this? Why make your own tabletop RPG system? If the rest of the videos on my channel demonstrate anything, it's that it's fun and easy to just modify existing systems, like 5th edition, to make the kind of content you want. Homebrew is a great way to practice game design without being burdened by designing something from scratch. And this question, I can't really tell you how to answer. I think the truth is, if you want to design a game, you should just design a game. The worst thing that happens is you make something that nobody needs, but you learn a lot doing it. I'm answering this question, why am I doing this? Because I like designing. I can't answer it for you. Similarly, the second big question, what is your game about? I can't give you any pointers for that. That's probably how you get to this point in the first place. You want to make a game about something. You want to make a game about fishing, about farming, about fighting demons. You could be inspired by something you read or watched, or an experience you had playing another game that you felt, oh, I wish there was a whole game just about that. For me, the jumping off point for this idea was I got Paramount Plus to watch all the new Star Treks, and since I was paying for it, I decided to just watch a bunch of other stuff on there, and I watched all of the show Evil, which is this kind of like over-the-top ghost hunting exorcism show. But I was watching that thinking this would make a fun tabletop experience. It's highly character-based. It's skill-based. There's sort of combat in that there are these tense encounters that are time-based in which something has to be defeated or quelled or understood. And an existing tabletop RPG did not just spring to mind as, oh, that's how I would make this. Now, if you do a quick Google, things like this do exist. There are indie games that cover this. And like I said, I just want to do this. The worst thing that happens is I make a thing that is strictly worse than those, and I never release it. But I still got the experience of designing this and making all these decisions. So now we arrive at the first question that I may actually be able to offer some advice for. And for me, that first question, after having the idea and deciding to do it, is how crunchy should this game be? How rules-based is this going to be? How much math do I think my players should be doing? And there are a lot of factors in answering this question. Who do you imagine this game is for? Are you looking to convert D&D or Pathfinder players to players of your game? Are you going after people who like story games? What do you like? What is your favorite part of a tabletop RPG? What is the part of that game that you wish you could rewrite and fix? Is it the social stuff? Is it the storytelling? Or is it the combat or the dice rolling? Importantly, what I'm not going to suggest here is that you look at your theme for this decision. I think you could totally make a game about court politics or romance and make it incredibly crunchy, have tons of stats, tons of rules, tons of dice. At the same time, I think you could make a game about large-scale naval combat and have very few rules. I really don't feel that you should limit yourself based on the theme. And I partially say that because I want this to be very crunchy. I am a big fan of rolling dice and doing math and having stats and leveling up. And even though what I'm trying to simulate in this ghost hunting game is a bunch of people standing in a room waving crosses and shouting in an apparition, I want that to be crunchy. I want that to have rounds. I want you to roll dice and do damage to the ghost and have the ghost do damage to you. That's fun for me. That is going to be fun to design and fun to play because that's what I like. I'm not considering the fact that ghost hunting is kind of more wibbly-wobbly. I don't want to make one of those games, and I do want to make a ghost hunting game, so I'm just gonna make a crunchy ghost hunting game. And so having answered that question, I think a great thing to look at next is coming up with the things that you are going to mechanize and the things that you're not going to mechanize. And what I mean by that is your game is probably going to have some rules that simulate something. Let's take 5th edition as an example. 90% of the rules in 5th edition simulate fighting. Then there are some rules around socializing. There's deception, persuasion, intimidation. There are also spells that are mechanized that have social consequences. But the act of making a friend at a tavern is not mechanized. That is up to the DM and up to the players. In the same way, exploring the world is a little bit mechanized. There's rules for traveling pace and stealth and gathering food, but they're vague, and there aren't a lot of them. And so I would say that 5e doesn't really heavily mechanize travel. And again, making this decision is about deciding which things you want to leave up purely to the creativity of the players and which things you want some restrictions on. I mean, the things that you mechanize are going to be the things that are harder to do, simply because they will have to achieve it mathematically. At the same time, those are probably the things that you want your players to be proudest of. I don't think in a 5th edition game I would be particularly proud of winning over an ally. That's just a fun story beat. But I might be very proud of a clever combination of spells between me and the paladin that knocked out a dragon in 2 rounds. I'm very proud of the things that I had to do mechanically. The things that I did narratively, it's cute, but it existed only in our imagination. I wasn't being necessarily super mathematically clever. So for my game, I know what I want to mechanize is the act of interacting with a spirit. The classic exorcism situation where you are saying chants, throwing holy water, shouting at the thing. I want that to be mechanized. I want to roll dice there. I want to follow rules. I want to take damage. It may not be literal damage, but I want to suffer setbacks that I can overcome by cleverly using the rules on my character sheet or just the rules of the game in general. What I probably won't mechanize for my game is stuff like research. A big part of ghost hunting shows, whether they're documentary style or narrative television, is that they often go do research. They go to the house, they poke around in the daylight, and then they go to the library and look at the microfiche and try and figure out if, someone died in the house. And I don't think that would make for an interesting bit of mechanical gameplay. I don't really want you to roll dice to see if you find the right microfiche. I just kind of want the DM to tell you what they tell you. That is not something that I am going to spend my time and energy and, frankly, page space trying to make rules for. So going down another level of detail, I've determined I want to make a relatively crunchy game, something in the vein of 5th edition, not in the vein of, let's say, lasers and feelings. I know I want to mechanize combat, in a sense, spiritual combat, and I know I probably don't want to mechanize research. So knowing that, I can start to make, or try to make, some more detailed game design decisions. And that's, which tropes of tabletop RPGs am I going to use? And I'll be even more specific. I want to answer 4 very specific questions. 1, am I going to use random number generation, generally rolling dice or, I don't know, maybe something else, to resolve uncertain outcomes? That's kind of a yes or no question. I also want to know, is this game going to have levels? Are my characters going to change and improve over time? Assuming I have characters, which, by the way, is just a baseline assumption. I'm kind of going to assume that if you're making a tabletop role-playing game, you are making a game with characters. Again, not to say that doesn't exist. There's a game called Everyone is John. I played it once with some coworkers a million years ago. But that is niche. That is unique. I'm assuming that you're not making something like that. So knowing you have characters, a big question is, are you going to use the general concept of class? That your character has a set of abilities based on some choice they have made, perhaps, about who they are and what they do, and that makes them unique from other characters? Or no, am I going to make a classless RPG? Maybe there's just a series of skills that you can learn in any order that have dependencies. That's a classless game. Are you going to use the general concept of, unfortunately, the word that gets used most is race, but generally more like background? Are there things that your character is based on what they were before the game began that, again, sets them apart from other characters? These are important questions. 5th edition says yes to all of these. Pathfinder says yes to all of these. Something like Lasers and Feelings doesn't. Having something like levels that change over time, that makes a game more suitable for something like campaigning, for playing more than once. That doesn't have to be the case. You may not want to do that. Having things like class or background help a game create a stronger sense of identity for each player. This is who my character is, and it is really distinct from who your character is. We do different things. We know different things. That kind of distinctiveness may not be what you want. It may not fit with your theme. It may not fit with how you want to play or what you want to design. For me, I'm saying yes to most of these. Yes, I want to use random numbers to overcome uncertain outcomes. And I'm going to say something controversial. I do kind of think that saying yes to that is almost the bare minimum for making a tabletop RPG. Again, I'm aware you could make one that doesn't use random number generation to resolve uncertain outcomes. I think some people might say that begins to move into an improv exercise, a guided improv exercise, versus a tabletop role-playing game. But that's not an important debate here, because I'm answering yes, I want that in my game. Will mine have levels? Yes, I want my game to be campaignable. I want characters to feel more and more powerful as time goes on. I want you to feel like your first haunt is dangerous and everything frightens you, and 5 haunts in, you're a pro, nothing scares you except, oops, I accidentally summoned Satan and now we're actually in danger. Will mine have class? Yeah, I kind of want class. I think that some of the fantasy of ghost hunting media is specialties. That being said, I don't particularly feel the need to mechanize background. I think that because I'm building a game that takes place in our world, and every member of your team is going to be a human being, you, as human players, will bring all of your ideas of what makes a human being unique to this game. I don't need to teach you what a dwarf and an elf and a Kalishtar are, because those don't exist in my game. And I don't need to teach you what a human being is. You've been one your whole life. So I'm kind of ignoring background, race. I'm certainly not going to mechanize human race. That's monstrous. Now, this is a decision I could consider going back on, not the race part, but the background part. Maybe I do want some kind of backgrounds that change, I don't know, starting equipment, your attitude towards ghosts. I don't know. So far, we're looking pretty good. I know I'm making a ghost hunting game. I know it's going to be crunchy. I know we're going to simulate spiritual combat. We're going to level up. We're going to have class. We're going to use dice or random number generation. But we're probably not going to have, races. Another big question, are you going to use stats? Are your characters going to have numerical, or maybe not numerical, attributes and scores that describe who they are and what they can do, and that almost certainly are going to affect the outcome of those random number-based resolutions? Most people are going to answer yes to this, especially if you've made it this far and you've said yes to mechanizing things, and you've said yes to using dice, and you've said yes to levels or class or race. The likelihood is that yes, you're going to want some kind of attributes. How many, what they are, that really depends on your theme, how crunchy you want to be. Again, I hate to keep using the same examples, but I'm trying to choose things that I think people know. Lasers and Feelings has one stat and a few sort of meaningless narrative attributes. D&D obviously has tons of attributes and stats. It has 6 actual stats, but then it has proficiencies, and it uses class level to affect various things. And it has a proficiency bonus and all sorts of extra numbers that get tacked on all over the place. This is one that you really can't answer at this stage. This is something that is going to be play tested. But to be able to answer vaguely, yeah, I probably want a couple of them. And then to think, well, what are they probably? So for me, for this game, I know class level is one of them. I think I want that to be pretty primary, which is how experienced are you at the type of ghost hunting or spirit, whatever, that you practice? How good of a priest are you? How powerful of a psychic are you? I know for me, I also want to mechanize something like fear. I want your resistance to fear to be a part of this. Perhaps that's associated with class, but I actually think that's probably more something that is character to character. My character is easily frightened, but on the flip side, they are resilient against such and such. That, I think I want that numerically represented. How easy is it to scare you or break your concentration? But characters are not the only people that have numbers. Your world may have numbers. Other creatures, NPCs, things that the DM controls should have numbers. So for me, I have a lot of ideas for stats and attributes of spirits. I know that I want my spirits to have a certain amount of presence in the world. How physical are they versus how ethereal are they? I want them to have coherence. How chaotic are they, or how much can they control their own powers or actions? I think I want them to have some sort of health. I think I want a health stat. I want to be able to push down that number to various ends. And I certainly want to make some rules, whether general or specific, for what spirits can do. Specifically, what can they do to players? How can they harm, alter, distract, frighten player characters? So I've got this kind of grab bag of stats and attributes, and this is what I'm going to be messing around with as I begin to make this. And having answered all of these questions, I come down to the least fun, depending on how you look at it, and most important question, which is, what is my minimum viable product? How quickly can I take this idea and the answers to these questions and make something that is playable? It doesn't have to be great. It doesn't have to be perfect. It can maybe only handle some very small situation. You don't have to make a full game, but you have to make something and try to play it. So you've looked at what you're trying to mechanize. Probably the minimum viable product is to get through one instance of that thing. If you are trying to make a game that mechanizes naval warfare on a large scale, yeah, sure, there's going to be a politics component and a resources component and also a naval battle component, but probably your minimum viable product is a naval battle. Can you make an interesting naval battle? Don't worry about resources. Don't worry about politics. Don't worry about the map. Can you just, I don't know, get a chessboard and make some paper boats and a couple of rules and some dice, and can you have an interesting, fun time having a little naval battle? That's the minimum viable product for that. What's your minimum viable product? For me, it's 1 spiritual ghost encounter, 3 character classes at level 1, just make the powers of a level 1 character, some stats, some dice roll rules, some spirit rules, and can I run my table through an encounter and see how it feels, see how they feel about it, see how I feel about it. You know, ultimately, answering all those questions, making a bunch of sketch pads and Google Docs full of words, which is what I frequently do when I'm starting a game, is nothing. You've kind of done nothing, and I know it sounds really negative, but in the world of game design, especially when you're working as a game designer, not a developer as well, not an artist as well, just having an idea and having it written down and having it even be detailed isn't a game. And you shouldn't stop there. And you shouldn't spend too much time just doing that. You really need to get to a minimum viable product as quickly as you can, because you are going to learn a ton. And frankly, I think it's motivating. I think there's nothing more motivating in game design than watching someone have fun playing your game. I know in a lot of the board games I designed, even though I was doing it, professionally, and they became very complex over time, I always wanted to make that first prototype and bring it over to my coworkers and be like, can we just play this little thing for 5 minutes? This may end up being a 40-minute board game, but can we just do this interaction for 5 minutes? And you get someone to laugh, and you get someone to smile, and you get someone to dunk on another player and, feel powerful and smart and strong. And that's the good stuff. That I didn't need to come to them with a finished board game. And frankly, I shouldn't, because how would I inform all those decisions? So that's the question I would leave you with. If you're designing your own tabletop RPG, as I hope to in the coming months, and you've answered all these questions and a million others that you've asked yourself, the important question is, how quickly can you get this to a table? So I'm going to leave it at that, because I need to stop doing this. I need to stop thinking about this game, and I need to make this game. Hopefully, next time I make one of these kind of minimal podcasty episodes, it will be Playtest 0. In the meantime, you can look forward to me going back to the old stuff. I'm going to make some more 5e subclasses for a couple of weeks. And hopefully this was informative, enjoyable, at the very least listenable. And maybe I will see you on the next one. Bye.